You think you know Roman emperors, men of power, ambition, and maybe a little madness, but what if I told you there was one emperor so unhinged, so dangerously depraved, that he makes the others look like humble public servants? Forget what the textbooks told you about Caligula. They sanitized the story. They didn't tell you about the emperor who literally declared war on the ocean and forced his soldiers to attack the wave, a ruler who turned the imperial palace into a high-class brothel staffed by the wives of his own senators, a man so convinced of his own divinity that he ordered people executed for not worshiping him with enough enthusiasm. Buckle up, because you're about to discover the real Caligula, a story of incest, sadism, and godlike ego that spiraled into one of the most terrifying reigns in human history. This isn't just history, it's a descent into madness. And if you're ready for more historical truths that are too shocking for school, hit that subscribe button now, because we're just getting started. 1. He turned power into a spectacle of humiliation. When Caligula first came to power, Rome celebrated, but they soon learned that their new emperor didn't see himself as a leader. He saw himself as a master and everyone else as his plaything. His specialty was humiliation. He would force the most respected senators, old men who had governed provinces, to run for miles alongside his chariot, gasping for air, their fine robes caked in mud, just for his own amusement at his lavish banquets. He wouldn't just dine. He would randomly point to his guests and joke about how much their heads were worth, then laugh as they sat frozen in terror. But here's where it gets truly sadistic. Caligula would interrupt the dinner party, take a senator's wife into a back room, and then return to the table to give a detailed, public critique of her performance in bed to her own husband. He wasn't just being cruel. He was systematically breaking the wills of the most powerful men in Rome, proving that their honor, their families, and their very lives were subject to his every whim. This wasn't politics. This was the work of a predator enjoying his hunt. 2. He didn't just rule Rome. He thought he was a god. Most emperors were deified after they died. Caligula decided to skip the line. He declared himself a living god, Neos Helios, the new sun, and he demanded to be worshipped as one. He ordered the heads of famous statues of gods all across the empire to be removed and replaced with replicas of his own. Imagine praying to Jupiter, only to look up and see the smirking face of the lunatic who ruled you. He even built a private bridge connecting his palace on the Palatine Hill to the Temple of Jupiter, so he could have private consultations with the other god. But his most audacious act of divine ego was the infamous Bridge of Boats. To prove a prophecy wrong that said he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae, Caligula did exactly that. He gathered thousands of merchant ships, lined them up in a 2-mile floating pontoon bridge across the bay, covered them with earth, and then spent 2 days riding back and forth on his favorite horse, incestuous, wearing the armor of Alexander the Great. It was a logistical nightmare and a massive waste of resources, all to satisfy a personal grudge. He didn't just want to be a god. He wanted to reshape reality itself to fit his delusion. 3. The war against the ocean. This is the moment that cemented Caligula's legacy of insanity. After planning an invasion of Britain that he abandoned at the last second, Caligula couldn't return to Rome empty-handed. He needed a victory, so he invented an enemy that couldn't fight back. He marched his legions, tens of thousands of hardened soldiers, to the northern coast of Gaul. He had them assemble in full battle formation with catapults and siege engines, all facing the English Channel. Then, as his commanders watched in stunned silence, Caligula ordered his men to attack the sea. Yes, you heard that right. Roman legionaries, the most disciplined fighting force in the ancient world, were ordered to charge into the surf, stabbing the water with their swords and javelin. After this bizarre battle was over, Caligula declared a great victory over Neptune, the god of the sea. But wait! It gets even more insane. A victorious general always returns with the spoils of war. So, Caligula ordered his soldiers to collect seashells from the beach, declaring them to be the treasure of the ocean that he had conquered. He had these shells shipped back to Rome to be displayed in his triumphal procession. You don't learn this in history class. The Emperor of Rome celebrated a military victory against waves and collected seashells as tribute for a palace of unspeakable depravity. While Caligula's public acts were insane, his private life was a cesspool of horror. He was widely believed to be in incestuous relationships with all 3 of his sisters, especially his favorite Drusilla. When she died, he didn't just mourn her, he declared her a goddess and made it a capital crime for anyone in Rome to laugh, bathe, or dine with their family for an entire year. His paranoia was as legendary as his perversion. He communicated in secret codes and believed everyone was plotting against him. He famously wished that the Roman people had but one neck so he could decapitate them all at once. When the palace ran low on funds from his extravagant spending, Caligula came up with a grotesque solution. He turned the imperial palace into a state-run brothel. He forced the wives and daughters of prominent senators and knights to work as prostitutes, with the emperor himself acting as a pimp, personally showing clients around and negotiating prices. It was the ultimate act of degradation, transforming the heart of the Roman Empire into his personal den of iniquity. 5. The god who bled like a man. You cannot unleash this kind of terror without consequences. The men Caligula had humiliated, tortured, and terrorized were not going to endure it forever. A conspiracy was formed, led by the very officers of the Praetorian Guard, the men sworn to protect him. In January of 41 AD, as Caligula was walking through a secluded palace corridor, the assassin struck. It wasn't one stab, it was a frenzied attack. The first blow came from an officer named Cassius Chaerea, whom Caligula had constantly mocked for having a high-pitched voice. Then the others joined in. In the end, the living god was stabbed over 30 times, but the assassins knew that killing the monster wasn't enough. They had to erase his entire line. They stormed the palace, found Caligula's wife, and murdered her. Then, they found his infant daughter, Julia Drusilla. According to historian Suetonius, they took the baby by the feet and smashed her head against the wall. Caligula's reign of terror, a 4-year fever dream of madness and sadism, ended in a pool of his own blood on the palace floor. He who claimed to be a god died like a slaughtered animal, a brutal end to a brutal reign. His story is a terrifying masterclass in how absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it can unleash a monster. The story of Caligula is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most horrifying monsters in history aren't mythical beasts, but real men given limitless power. If these deep dives into the dark corners of history fascinate you, hit that like button, subscribe for more shocking secrets, and tell me in the comments, what other historical monster should we investigate next?